Okay. I'm calling the January 24th regular Board of Trustees meeting to order. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Please cast your votes. Or any questions?
Okay.
We waiting.
On the screen.
He's on the screen. And that motion passes. Move to approve the minutes.
Move for approval. Second.
Any questions?
I'm going to vote yes, but let the record reflect that I have to abstain from 12-16 and 12-29.
12.
We're doing them in bulk.
Okay,
12, 16, 12, 29.
okay. Please cast your votes. Sorry. That motion passes. Entertain a motion to convene an executive session.
So moved.
All those who are not a part of executive session, please excuse your, Dr. Prince, you have a question?
Yes, may we state for the public what legal advice we're going to receive in item 2G?
Mr. Mazzini.
What type of legal advice?
She wants to know if we can state for the public what type of legal advice we'll be discussing.
Okay, thank you.
We good? We have a motion to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
No second, okay. Thank you. Board members and members of the audience, I want to take a moment to share some sad news that many of you have likely heard, which is that last week, one of our board members, Miss Erica Coakley, experienced a tragedy that no parent ever wants to experience. It is with deep sadness that I announced that she lost her 23-year-old son, Daquan Bamberg. We extend our deepest condolences to Ms. Coakley, her family, and her loved ones as they mourn the loss of their son, brother, friend. We share in their sorrow and we pray for the strength and comfort for them in the weeks to come. If we could observe a moment of silence. Thank you. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item up is item 4A. Have a motion? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve.
There's a second.
Second.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, ask that you cast your vote. That item passes. Item 4B.
I move that we overturn the constituent board decision and place the student at Daniel Jenkins Academy.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Okay, I ask that you cast your vote. That item passes. Item 4C.
I move that we uphold the constituent board's decision.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think it was Ms. Coates, right? Mhm. We'll sit Dr. French and Ms. Coates. Okay. Any questions? Please cast your votes. That item passes. Item 4D.
I've got a motion. I move that we uphold the constituent board decision and provide information to the parents about state charter school options and services that could be provided by CCSD.
Yeah, you're gonna have to say that slower.
Got it?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All right, please cast your votes. That item passes. Item 4E.
I move to approve the lease back agreement of all and all property.
You got it. Yes. Okay, any questions? All right, please cast your votes. That item passes. Item 4F.
I move to approve the forwarding of a formal complaint to the South Carolina Department of Education related to the attached contract teacher. Second.
Are there any questions? All right, please cast your votes. That item passes. Item 5A, special recognition. Dr. Taylor?
Thank you so much. Good evening, Chairman Matt, Vice Chair Waters, members of the Board of Trustees, Mr. Kennedy. This evening for special recognition, we're excited to recognize our Board of Trustees in honor of South Carolina's School Board Recognition Month. The theme for this year is celebrating local leaders. So we would like to take a moment to celebrate each of you, each and every one of you, and express our gratitude and appreciation for all that you do in service to our children, to our families, and our community. To mark this honor, I'm going to read the governor's proclamation designated January as School Board Recognition Month. Whereas education is the foundation upon which the economic, intellectual, and social capital of our state is built, and whereas school boards directly influence instruction in South Carolina's public schools, and whereas the decisions of local school boards affect the present and future lives of children while setting the direction to prepare all students to be competitive in a local, state, national, and global 21st century knowledge economy, and whereas local school board members work with parents, businesses, education professionals, and other community members to represent their views and create the ideal educational vision for their public schools and students. And whereas School Board Recognition Month highlights the unique role school boards play in representing their constituents by promoting and advocating for quality public education. Now, therefore, I, Henry McMaster, Governor of the state of South Carolina, do hereby proclaim January 2022 as School Board Recognition Month throughout the entire state and encourage all South Carolinians to recognize the contributions of local school boards to the academic successes of public school students across the Palmetto State. So as I read that, I'd like to thank Reverend Matt, Ms. Waters, Ms. Darby, Ms. Coates, Dr. French, Dr. Frazier, Ms. Green, Ms. Hederick, and Ms. Coakley for your hard work and dedication to the students of the Charleston County School District. I'd like those who are in the audience with me to please join and give our board members a round of applause. Thank you. We appreciate all that you do. And with that, Ms. Waters, I conclude tonight's special recognition.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. The next item on the list is 6A, or on the agenda, 6A, public comments. We do have in-person public comments. The first person is Mr. Francis Baylock.
Wow, I got a whole 2 minutes. It's so exciting. I'd like to speak on the subject of ESSER funding. and just say that I'm asking for more transparency in the ESSER fund distribution process. Though the board has appointed 2 board members to an ESSER 3 planning committee last May and appointed members to an ESSER 3 committee in October, documentation for meeting agendas, meeting minutes, and specific ESSER proposals that are reviewed do not appear on your website. This information is necessary for transparency. So I ask that you please publicly disclose that information today. It also would be prudent for CCSD to list the ESSER 3 committee members on its website, particularly since Darren Goss, who presented the Reimagine proposal, has publicly stated that he served on the committee. Now, I understand that you don't want to talk about Reimagine tonight. And if I was you, I wouldn't want to talk about it either. So let's get back to work and get to doing what the Reimagine proposal claims to do, and do it from the ground up, not from the top down. Please.
Thank you. The next person is Ms. Anna Maria.
Hello, I have a couple of pictures here of 2 of my dear friends. I'd just like to ask you, what do my dear friends have in common with our school children? They are victims of medical tyranny. Today in DC, hundreds of doctors of conscience are fighting the medical tyranny that took my friends' lives. Tyranny that paid hospitals so that rather than give patients life-saving early treatment, they paid them to kill people. Today, are you aware that in this very room, we are under medical tyranny? And today, are you aware that you are acting as tyrants? Mask quotas, quarantine quotas, PCR quotas, masks that don't stop viruses, quarantines that are unscientific, PCR tests that are fake and faulty. Why don't you tell us what's really going on here? How much money have you taken to bring social collapse to our children? How many children are in mental anguish, and how many have taken their own lives so that you could get billions from the Biden regime? Are you aware that our nation's children have been sold for $220 billion? Is that the amount that our National Education Administration was willing to take to send our children to what has become concentration camps? Do you realize you have prostituted yourself to damage and destroy our children? The game is up. Today in DC, doctors of conscience are revealing that the Biden regime has bribed hospitals to murder patients. And the families of the victims are awake now and taking action to bring those responsible to justice. Biden's regime bribed not only hospitals, but school districts also. Do you realize that you can't fool people forever? Do you realize that God said he will not let the guilty go unpunished? So many teachers really care and have sacrificed everything to teach the children that they carry in their hearts.
Thank you. The next person is Ms. Joy Brown.
I wanted to share with you all something that the community put together, because we heard a lot about the community not like more complaining and not really doing anything and not having ideas. So I just wanted to share some of the ideas that we have. Imagine the things we could do if CCSD supported the work of teachers and principals. To Charleston County School District Board of Trustees, we reject the Reimagine proposal because it seeks to create an unnecessary framework that would add an appointed layer of bureaucracy and a separate governance structure between 23 school communities and the school district. We support a more comprehensive strategic plan that prioritizes actual student and school needs. We demand that all school board members and the superintendent receive school improvement council training. We demand that CCSD acknowledge and support SICs and the important plans of individual schools. We demand that CCSD provide resources and support to SICs for developing 5-year improvement plans. We demand that CCSD fully fund classrooms and support school administrators and educators in their current efforts to educate students. We demand that CCSD empower schools to collaborate with each other within feeder patterns, constituent districts, and across the school district. We demand that CCSD abide by state and federal transparency laws and guidelines regarding the distribution of ESSER COVID relief funding for schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Carol Temple is next.
Good evening, everyone. We have to make our public schools the best they can be for all students. Don't you agree? I still recommend the board reject the Reimagine Schools proposal. How can spending $5.1 million with an unqualified foundation to convene meetings and create layers of bureaucracy actually help student learning? I want to make a few other points. Number one, CCSD should support school administrators and educators and strengthen the school improvement councils. They know what's needed to directly support teaching and learning. Number two, the ESSER 3 funds of $163 million need to go first to our schools to improve teaching and learning. I understand there are 60 to 65 proposals submitted by foundations and nonprofits. However, these proposals should not receive any of these ESSER 3 funds unless the project directly improves student achievement or the wraparound services needed to support students' learning and their well-being. Number three, as responsible school board members, please read the school improvement plans within the regions of the Charleston County you were elected to represent. Finally, let's not waste precious resources and time on unknown innovation plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. George Temple.
Good evening. I'm Dr. George Temple, a member of the District 3 Constituent School Board, and I'm speaking independently this evening. I have 3 60-second take-homes, and that'll give you a minute to cogitate over what I have to share with you. One, I know you don't want to hear about Reimagine again, but here it is. You've only tabled it. It now needs to be eliminated and never to return, and you've heard the reasons why. As a board member, I attend as many of the School Improvement Council meetings as I can. Parents, teachers, and principals know what to do. Their work is data-driven and needs to be supported. You want community schools? This is where the community begins. I was appalled to learn that the board members do not read reports or the 5-year plans of the schools in their district. The board should support school improvement councils and their improvement plans. Finally, ESSER 3 funds, some $163 million, should go directly to the schools and not to organizations or groups with plans that haven't originated in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. In addition to the public comments you just heard, we did receive comments online. These comments ranged in topic from the face mask policy to ESSER 3 funds to sex education training in schools. Please know that the board does receive these public comments and that they are also available on the public board docs section of the website. That concludes our public comment section of the agenda. And next we have item 7A, the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harris and CCSD school board members. This is the superintendent's update. It'll be my first one in my interim role. The items that we will cover are the COVID update. Mr. Roy will do that.
Your microphone.
It's either your microphone or your mask is causing a little buzz.
Is this better?
One needs to hand him a new microphone.
So switch.
Is this better?
It's a bit better.
Right. So the agenda for the superintendent's update,
It's actually not much better, Mr. Kennedy.
Maybe without the mask. It might be too close though. Try pushing it back a little bit.
All right, so take 3.
Yay.
All right, so thank you. So the superintendent's update, the agenda, COVID update, Mr. Glory will do that. And then I will talk about the vision that the staff has been working on, implementation process around those strategies. And we'll have a section on the ESSER proposals, what stakeholder engagement will look like, and then get your feedback on what we presented and questions. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Glory.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So the first 2 slides are what we show you every board meeting, where we stand in the community, where we stand in CCSD. This first slide is the latest information from DHEC data, the 19th of January. The incident rate in Charleston, as well as the trend for incident rate and the percent positive is extremely high. And all of the counties in the state of South Carolina are currently rated high as well. Next slide shows you where we stand as a school district. Obviously, the 3 bars on the far right are the issues at hand. You can see we peaked at 1,724 cases between students and staff. Students are in blue and staff is in orange. That number came down over this past week, down to a total of 1,219. I will say that if you look at our website, we had been behind in our close contact numbers. The reason for that was that if a report was submitted by a person, by an individual in a school about a close contact, not a positive case, that was being handled at the school level, that data was being held at the school level until we could get a firm handle on the positive cases. And then Director Nitz began receiving that information on close contacts from the school. So that number for close contacts is increasing now. And what we've essentially seen is we have about the same number of close contacts as we have positive cases. So there was a lag in the close contact list, but the positive cases are pretty much caught up. We do have a small backlog, but the director, as well as her staff of contact tracers, are really working 7 days a week, getting a handle on this. And we believe that the worst, at least as far as Omicron, is behind us as far as contact tracing goes. The next slide, please. This next slide shows the changes that have occurred since our last board meeting. DHEC put out an updated school guidance document on the 15th of January. The most notable change on that was the test to stay program, which we had implemented a couple weeks prior. It changed the test date for those needed to be tested from 4 days to day 5 to 7. So students and staff can stay in school if they're a close contact, and at day 5 to 7, they're tested to determine if they can remain in school or if they have to be quarantined. To accommodate the testing, we've really worked extremely hard. Again, Director Nitz has been working with DHEC and their contractor to establish test sites. Last week, we opened up Burke High School during the school day. This week, today, we opened up Camp Road, Cooper River CAS, and Lucy Beckham High School. We still have 4 other sites. We have Baptist Hill, we have St. John's, we have Wando, and we have Stall as daytime sites. And we continue on with the nighttime testing at the locations that we opened up in October of this past year. That closes the report, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much. So the majority of the presentation this evening is going to relate to the ESSER 3 funding. And so I'm going to give on this slide just a quick background on the ESSER 3. You all have seen this information before. The state of South Carolina received a little over $2 billion for K-12 education, or for education. The CCSD received $163.2 million. We received the largest share of any K-12 system in the state. So 163.2 represents the highest allocation to any district in the state. The funds can only be spent in the 15 categories that we reviewed with you all last year, last spring, last summer. 20% of those expenditures must be for activities directly related to learning loss. And then we have some very stringent requirements that have been levied on us by the federal government for those funds. And I'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So this is our why slide. Back in the fall, October, November timeframe, Dr. Postlewaite brought the cabinet together. She indicated that we need to bring our executive level, executive directors that are on the academic side along with the cabinet. And we need to figure out what would be the vision for the district for the use of the ESSER 3 funds. We had a day and a half offsite. The first day was off day. It was December the 14th. We followed that up on January 3rd with a half day offsite. And there are teams of people, staff people been working since that time period to get us where we are right now with this presentation. And so you see here on our why, we're proposing, and certainly for your feedback, is the reason why we are presenting this tonight, that we will use the ESSER 3 funds to ensure by the spring of 2027, all students will read on grade level by the 5th grade. In order to do that, we need to have rigorous grade level instruction in our elementary schools. And in order to be able to do that, we need to have leaders and teachers who are trained and ready to be able to provide that rigorous grade level instruction. And then support our teachers and support our school-based leaders. We need to make sure that we have the wraparound services and the community services that can be provided. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. Next slide, please. So again, this is the framing of the vision that we have. By the spring of 2027, all students will read on grade level by grade 5. So what I want to do now, I want to talk about how I view work in a complex organization like CCSD. I'm going to do that through an analogy. In the early 1960s, John F. Kennedy made a vision of putting the man on the moon by the end of that decade, within the decade of 1960. That's what the country would do. And that, in fact, as you know, is what we did. In order to do that, the country, NASA came up with, they had to have different systems in place. Rocket systems to get the capsule up to the moon, had to have life support systems for astronauts as they're flying through space, and as well as while they're on the moon. They had to have a recovery system when they came back to Earth, as they came back into the reentry and into the recovery in the ocean. And so what we propose here is something similar. It's this notion of being able to have all students being able to read on grade level by grade 5. And we propose 3 strands to be able to do that, as shown here. The rigorous grade level instruction, high quality teacher and leaders, and wraparound services. Going back to my analogy again, so there's been questions been asked from schools, and rightfully so. If we focus only on the 5th grade, on reading in the elementary school, what about the other things? What about math? What about the middle school? What about high school students, interventions that are needed? And certainly we will focus on all of those things. And again, going back to the analogy of the 1960s, there was this vision of putting a man on the moon, but the country, the federal government worked on many, many things in the 1960s other than that. For instance, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, those were important things that took place in the 1960s in parallel with the space operation. And so similarly here in CCSD, this proposal, we will be focusing on reading in elementary school during this period between now and 2027. But at the same time, we have significant amount of funding over that time period to address other needs in the district. And the point is that if we are successful in being able to ensure that all of our elementary school students are able to read by the time they get into the 5th grade, then the interventions that we have now in the middle schools and high schools, those will diminish. There won't be the need for those types of intervention. And so if we can make that a success, we believe then that would be successful for the entire district. And then the other piece here on the bottom of this slide, if now, within the K-12 world, there's this term of implementing initiatives with fidelity. And so if we implement with fidelity, then we will be successful. And so what does fidelity look like is what these bottom two slides are indicating. And so as we propose to roll out this vision and these strands to make that vision a reality, we have to make sure that we have an ability to successfully implement any programs that we have and any initiatives that the district might have, and any proposals that you all might authorize for outside community organizations to support the ESSER $3. There has to be a way to make sure that we have success there. On the next series of slides, Ms. Belcher is going to go through each of those pillars and in a little bit more detail, and then we'll come back and talk about engagement process.
So in part, what my responsibility is to connect what we've been doing over the last 2 years to where we think we're going to go and ways in which we're going to need support from our community partners, as well as leadership from school leaders and teacher leaders. So specifically, the most important thing in terms of closing the reading achievement gap will really be around focusing on rigorous grade level instruction. If we have high quality early childhood for all kids who need it, rigorous curriculum and instructional supports, including professional development that's job embedded and ongoing, we're confident that students will get to grade level by the 5th grade in reading. Now, I want to call out that we've already made some investments in this space and significant investments. The expansion of our early childhood program at Mary Ford and making sure that we're actually moving towards a more reading centric and academic early childhood curriculum, which is showing some success. We're in the process of going into a full ELA, a new curriculum process. The acceleration schools are piloting it now. Beginning this semester, we have a more sampling of schools across the system who are testing that curriculum. We've invested significantly in the acceleration schools and in professional development to support the rollout of the new ELA curriculum, the math curriculum, which we're still executing, and other district priorities like cultural competency. When we met as a leadership team and with the cabinet, we began socializing, well, if we use these ESSER funds, what are the big interventions that we believe will change the game for kids and put them on track towards that 5th grade reading? And these are some of the big priorities that we came up with, like really stepping back on our intervention strategy to make sure that it's individualized and meeting the needs of kids, and that we're providing necessary professional development and support, and that we're integrating that appropriately with our core or sort of typical reading instruction. Making sure that we have sufficient academic staff to support the academic priorities, and making sure that resources that are available to schools are curated so they understand under what conditions they are most useful, but also that they're sufficiently funded and invested in so that they can actually show some value over time. Every school can't do everything. They need to make some tough choices about what their key investments are going to be and ensure they're doing them in a high quality way. We want to make sure that we do have more time within our school year calendar for professional development, and continue the work that we've begun to making sure that every child in this county who needs it has access to early childhood and early childhood intervention. Now, at this point, these are ideas from a small subset of the leadership of this district. We've socialized it with the principal cabinet, and they've given us some feedback. We have more work to do to figure out if these are the right things, including talking to the teachers of the year, talking to other principals, and making sure that we're getting the right list of investments under this category. If we move to the next slide, we go in more detail to this idea of high quality teachers and leaders. Again, there's nothing that research has shown the most important thing for a child's academic success is the quality of their teacher. The second most important thing is the quality of the principal. So making sure that we are actually a place that attracts and retains highly talented, diverse teachers and leaders is critically important to make sure that we can provide that rigorous grade level curriculum that we think is necessary for kids to get to reading level by the 5th grade. Again, this is not a new strategy, and it's expansion of a strategy that we've already begun under the leadership of Bill Brigman and the rest of the HR department. Expanding Teach Charleston, making sure that we're building a classified employee to certified teacher pipeline, which reflects folks who are invested in the school district, that are committed to South Carolina and to Charleston County, and who represent the diversity of the kids that we serve. Building a leadership pipeline so that we're able to spot our young talent, give them professional learning experiences to put them on the track towards the principalship. That work we hope to share with this board later on in the next couple of months with myself and Terry Nichols, who's been leading that work on the HR side to make sure we put out a vision for where we're going, and partnering with schools of education and higher education to meet our high need talent areas, including special education, STEM, and again, more teachers of color. The rest of this may be possible investments that we think could make a difference. For example, a differentiated pay scale for folks who work within turnaround schools, because we know that the continuity of adults in those schools is important. So it's trying to figure out ways to keep teachers and keep principals in those schools and to build healthy succession plans when change is necessary. If we go to the next slide, the wraparound service piece is the part where I know we're going to need the most community help and support. This is the idea that right now, almost all of our student body and our adults are coming out of a tough time where their social, emotional, mental health needs are significant. And to make sure that they can remain interested and focused on their academic success, we need to make sure that we have supports in place to put them on a path towards success. So eliminating any obstacles to their success and providing supports outside of school to get them there. Again, this is an area where we've already made some investments, including adding more mental health professionals and an investment in ongoing expansion of restorative practice across the district as a positive intervention and culture building and behavior. But there may be other things that we think will also be important, like piloting a school community center that includes broad services that would support the community and allow families to focus on their child's education, opportunities for community outreach, opportunities for multilingual learners. All of these, again, are the initial ideas that need to be further socialized and, more importantly, customized to the unique needs of sub-communities within our community. What does Baptist Hill need that might be different from what Burke needs, that might be different than what Stahl needs? You go to the next slide, please. So part what I want to do is make sure that we're linking to where we are now, because I'm sure there are folks who are saying, why didn't we share some of this earlier? And I think it's important to say, we are not done with the COVID crisis. We've been talking about COVID recovery, and on Friday before Martin Luther King Day weekend, we had the most numbers of adults absent in our system that we've had since the beginning of the COVID crisis. We are still very much in it. That means that we have a lot of adults from central office deployed in schools to make sure that classrooms are running safely. It means that some of the people who are intended to drive this strategy, like principals or instructional coaches, are spending time teaching in classrooms. And it means folks like Jeff Perot and folks on his staff are serving out lunches so that we can make sure that the school is still running. That matters because to be able to transition to this COVID recovery, we have to recognize where we are and also the challenges that we're dealing with as a system to get to this vision. Specifically, we're in a good place in that we do not have a system-wide COVID gap because this board and the previous board ensured that we stayed open for most of the pandemic and we're able to provide in-person instruction. So we're able to target the resources that we can put towards COVID recovery to our students of color and our students in poverty where we've had achievement gaps prior to that. Yet we know across the system, has been shared in our board presentation in December, we have deep mental health and wellness challenges across the entire system in every single school at every grade level that we also need to be proactive and responsive to make sure that kids can focus on school and they want to come to school and they see school as a place they want to be. We go to the next slide. Just calling out that we have some bets on the table already and what we've been doing to date in terms of COVID recovery and responding to learning loss. And some of these are investments that are supported by ESSER 2. So making sure that we have additional academic supports like the SAGA tutoring for our high school students to close Algebra 1, passing gaps at Burke, West Ashley High School, and at Stahl High School. Investing obviously in safety procedures, making sure that we are prioritizing the acceleration schools, not only in our investments, but also in our time. While many folks have been out in schools covering classes, we've tried to ensure that the acceleration schools team can continue to focus on that important work. And making sure that we are all hands on deck in terms of our mental health support. So anyone who has professional mental health training is working as much as is possible with kids in direct service versus more back office work. We also have done some initial community engagement work, as this board is well aware, in terms of helping prioritize the key areas detailed in ESSER 3 through town hall meetings, phone surveys, mailings. That helped us narrow the list of the allowable categories down to the list of things that this community felt was most important. We added additional capacity to support the senior leadership group in developing the ESSER 3 and to actually go through the initial applications from community members to ensure that we were well reviewing them and evaluating them based on the extent to which they're helpful in COVID recovery, cost effectiveness, and demonstrated track record of success. Soliciting those ideas helped inform our thinking. So I want to make sure that we say thank you to all those community organizations that have already submitted those ideas. I think the key phase is the next phase, because it's about matching to individual school communities what's the right fit for them. So if someone has a wonderful volleyball program, and I'm making this up, that was not that an idea, which school districts with that athletic program really matter the most to? And so that no school is taking on too much, they're taking on a reasonable amount of change that's really going to differentiate that school and have a powerful value proposition to the parents in that community of why they should send their kids there.
So you all have seen a version of this slide before, and what the slide attempts to do is to show to you all, to demonstrate the complexity of all of the initiatives that we have currently going on in the district, and what and a sample of what may be to come. What's shown in the circles there are just a subset of what's happening currently in the district, and this is without having even planned out fully the ESSER 3 dollars and what those initiatives would be. And so the message from this particular slide is that we have a lot of complexity, we have a lot of different funding sources, and if we don't prioritize how we handle this, we don't prioritize how we assign resources, both financial resources as well as people to manage these projects, then to reach any vision, reach any set of objectives across the district, it's going to be very difficult to do that because of the complexity here. Next slide, please. So on the vision slide that we showed, they have the 3 pillars on it. There were 2 bars across the bottom. Those are what I call the structures that we need to put in place to undergird the work that we're doing. The first of the 2 is the accountability and supports. And so the first one here is that we need to establish standards, and we across 10 dimensions. And the 10 dimensions are not random. There are 10 items that we want to take a look at. In fact, we have a data analysis underway now that we anticipate having results around end of February, first part of March. And across those 10 dimensions, then that will give us an indication of where we need to make changes within our individual schools. So for example, one of those dimensions is teacher quality and diversity, teacher quality and diversity. So we constantly talk about the level of experience in say in our Title I schools, that the level of experience for teachers tends to be very low. And so in creating a standard, this analysis would take a look at all the schools in the district, analyze the teacher level of experience, and then establish what a standard should be. So for example, it could be, we want X percentage of teachers that are senior teachers, let's say 20 years or so. We want X percentage in their middle career and X percentage that's beginning teachers. So you have a standard across the district. And then once you establish that standard, you take a look at each school and you do an assessment of that each school against that standard. And then once you understand the schools where there's a great gap or variance between the standard, and then you put in resources and initiatives to be able to begin to close that gap and bring that school towards the standard. And we have an example of that here in the district that we've been working on for like 25 years, and it is the school building program. So back in 25 years ago, when the district took on trying to make sure that all our buildings are up to standard, we have modern school buildings, and we still do this with each 5 or 6 year school building program. We do an assessment across the district, which buildings meeting our standards, which buildings have deteriorated and therefore are not meeting that standard. And we allocate resources through the sales tax program in early part of the school building program through the bond sales that we did to make sure that all our schools have that, meet that standard. Another example of going back to teacher quality and diversity, we want to make sure, just like with the quality of our teachers in terms of experience level, we want to take a look at how diverse our school communities are in terms of the staff. Data analysis, district and community measures. So obviously we do a lot of data analysis on student data within the school district, but if we were going to have a major strand of work around community wraparound services, we need to establish community measures on what those are, as opposed to just saying that we're going to have wraparound services and have no way to measure those. Project management and performance metrics. In all of the successful organizations I've been a part of that have implemented really complex complex things, they had a way to manage that complexity. The way that I'm familiar with it is through project management, establishing performance metrics. And so we have some analysis that is taking place right now, prototype, in fact, that's been set up in the district to determine how best to manage our projects and initiatives, how to manage any ESSER funds that we might submit out to the community. Systems thinking. So this is, for me, this is the question of why. Why are initiatives successful in the district? Why are the ones that are not successful in the district? And so we have a cohort of people that we're beginning to train. We're selecting this cohort now to train in systems thinking. The systems thinking is like, for those of us who have who've been exposed to systems thinking in our schools, in our education in college and beyond, the Peter Senge type work. And so we have a group of 30 that we're going to train, district staff that we're going to train immediately. Cohort 1, we'll probably go to cohort 2 later in the year, so that we can probe and see what are those things we need to put in place to make sure that our initiatives that we take on are successful. Cultural competency. This is some of the work that I've done for the last year and a half or so. This past Friday, I was meeting with a principal over in Mount Pleasant, and she was telling me that in her school, the minority students there were struggling because of the low numbers of students in the school. So in her particular school, there were 31 African American students, 32 Hispanic students. She was telling me that if her African American students were lucky through their K-12 careers in Mount Pleasant schools, they may see have two African American teachers, and they rarely would see an African American that's in, let's say, a leadership role within the school building. And said for the Hispanic students, it was even worse than that. And so she went on to talk about what that meant for her students. As parents, we all want to make sure that our children are well cared for. And so if we have 3 demographics in a school and only one demographic of students, the teachers understand their cultural background, then it becomes difficult for those students to actually thrive in the school. And so this principal is very passionate about that. And so this is a part of the notion of cultural competency in the district. And then the last item here, support. So this is a lot of money. So we have $163 million ESSER 3. We got $72.4 million of ESSER 2, and we got the $13.4 million of ESSER 1. So we got almost $250 million over a short period of time to manage, design, and implement successfully. So it's federal dollars. So last fall, I took to the Audit and Finance Committee a audit plan that had our external audit firm that does our internal audits, Elliott Davis, to conduct an audit about federal programs. That results of that audit should be available around sometime in March. And so the reason that was done to make sure that we wanted to understand if there were any weaknesses in our processes and whether it's program processes or fiscal processes, as we move into the expenditures of these federal dollars, this $250 million that we had those processes in place appropriately. Next slide, please. In the second support under the pillars, engagement and voice. Student, in the voice here, I'm talking primarily student voices. But we have principals that we need to engage with in each of our schools around this work. Our teachers, I think it's this coming Wednesday, I have my first meeting with the expanded teacher of the year group. This is each school has a teacher of the year. And so I'll be meeting with that group for the first time this coming Wednesday. We will talk about this engagement process around the ESSER dollars and this vision that we have. Student voice, last week I was at a high school talking with the principal, and he was saying that the data on this discipline for his students was improving. And he attributed some of that to a large part of that to having to sit down and bringing in students to ask them what needed to be done. And so he saw results of that. And I'm a big proponent for sure of asking students what they think. I mean, what the work that we do here is for them. And so it's important to hear what they have to say about what we're doing for their lives. And then engaging with our PTAs, school improvement councils, and then all of our parents that in community at large. Next slide, please. So the ESSER 3 proposal timeline, this is looking back in the blue section there to the left, just for a history piece here. In the spring of last year, going through September, after the announcement, I think the announcement was made in March that we would get the $163 million of ESSER 3 that we received from the community during that time period, unsolicited proposals. Mr. Hamer was hired. He created a website portal to be able to receive the proposals. We had the community engagement. And as a result of that, we have 71 organizations that have submitted proposals to the district. In the fall, late fall, we had two advisory teams, one by the board and one internal CCSD staff, took a look at each of those proposals and did an evaluation of those proposals. The next steps in the red section here, the staff will align the programs meaning the proposals that were submitted by the community to the three strategic pillars that Ms. Belcher talked about. And if you were to think about those three pillars, the one on wraparound services is probably the one that's most likely that would align with the proposals coming from the community. And then once staff does that, then from this period forward through February, we would do the community engagements to determine the use of ESSER 3 funds. Next slide, please. So there was a question that came up, I think it was at the committee of the whole in January around the what's the deadline to expend the funds. Now, if you were to look on various websites, whether it's the U.S. Department of Education, South Carolina Department of Education, there's a conflict in information on those websites. So the district staff last week reached out to Nancy Williams, who is the CFO of the South Carolina Department of Education. We received a response from her on Saturday for the ESSER 3, and her response, it was an email, and this is a quote from her email of when those funds for ESSER 3 have to be expended. And that date is shown here, September 30, 2024. It's not obligated to be able to continue spending after September 30. The goods and services have to be received by September 30. And then then every district in the state has essentially 6 weeks from that date, September 30 to November 15, to submit claims for reimbursement on expenditures. Now that could change, the US government could change that date, but right now, this is the guidance that we've gotten from the CFO of the state of South Carolina Department of Education, and those are the guidelines that we have to follow. Next slide, please. Next, Dr. Taylor will talk about some of the engagement process for the ESSER 3
Thank
funding.
you. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And so Ms. Belcher provided an overview of our phase 1 engagement, but just to go into a little bit more detail, we started back in June, 4,000 surveys. We identified what the 6 priority areas were. Between June and July, we made nearly 500 phone calls to parents. We held 2 community forums. As Mr. Kennedy shared, we of course launched the portal. Our cabinet and senior leaders, we've held several retreats, and definitely at this point in time, we are engaging with our parents, our principals and teachers to prioritize the key activities. And so as we talk about phase 2 engagement, and Ms. Dangerfield, if you can go to the next slide, please. I'd like to share that we held an inaugural meeting with our community engagement committee. It's comprised of district office staff who work specifically with parent and community organizations, especially our school improvement councils, our PTAs, and our parent and community partners, as well as with principals. And so we're going to have a second meeting actually on tomorrow. And you can see a tentative timeline there as it relates to the design, what the communication of the engagement strategy looks like, the implementation of the strategy, making sure it's aligned with our initiatives, and then we will culminate with ensuring that there's a alignment with our engagement strategy and our strategic plan by June 1st. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. So the district has received, as I indicated a few minutes ago, 71 proposals for a total dollar value of $109 million. And the total ESSER $3 appropriation, $163 million. Out of the $163 million, roughly 10% is allocated out to charter schools. We've already approved $26 million for use of indoor air quality and for our safety purposes. And so the reason why I showed that the 109 and talk about those other numbers is that there's very little chance that we will allocate out $109 million, I think, to all the proposals out here. So there would there should not be an expectation that all 71 of these proposals will be funded, at least not fully. What's shown on the slide is a stratification of the proposals based on dollar values. 2 were received that exceeded $30 million. The Reimagine Schools from the Coastal Community Foundation, and 1 from Charity Foundation. Both of those proposals exceed $30 million. There are 8 proposals with values that's between $1 million. Greater than $1 million, but less than $30 million. And then 7 proposals with values between $500,000 and $1 million. And then the remaining have values less than $500,000. Next slide. So this is the proposed way that we would look at allocating the ESSER $3. Now the district would set a total dollar amount to be allocated to outside partners and a total dollar amount to be allocated to district initiatives. Generally, when you see a grantor granting funds, it's not with and requesting proposals for those funds, it's not with an open amount. That's a set amount that grantor says that the organization has to appropriate. And so we think we need to at least take a look at it from that perspective. And once we do that, we need to link the proposals then to the 3 pillars that support reading on grade level by 5th grade, if that in fact becomes the vision that the board adopts. Ongoing district initiatives should also be linked to that. So we have, as you know, a lot of activity going on with acceleration schools, mission critical, and other functions that that are already in place. And then, as we've said 2 or 3 times already this evening, I think this is probably the 4th time, we need to conduct extensive stakeholder engagement on the vision itself and the proposals that have come in. And then we will select proposals that support that vision. Next slide, please. So I do have one slide in here on the Reimagine Schools proposal. When I take a look at the proposal, I think there's some elements that could be supportive of the district. One of the things that is really should be clear to everybody, there's a tremendous amount of community interest in the ESSER 3 proposal, in the education associated with how the education might be supported. In my 7.5 years with the district, for now 3.5 years earlier, I have never seen this level of community support around any issue that sustained itself this long. So I think for me, that is a good thing to have that level of interest. So certainly an element around community interest is a good thing by the proposal. It also has some elements in it that do not appear to align with the district community views. So the Innovation Management Organization, as an example, IMOs.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure I understood. When you say community engagement and you say support, are you talking about supporting what? The
Dr.
specific
French,
proposal?
can we
or
please
something
hold
else?
questions to the end of the
I
presentation?
think this is really important to get clear right now.
But I think
It
that's
sounded
something-
like he was saying that the community has come out tremendously.
Dr. French,
support.
I agree with
Dr.
you.
French, we have an appropriate time for questions and we shouldn't be cutting off the speaker.
I
Please let
didn't cut him
finish.
off. I raised my hand.
I
was
agree
respectful.
with the board meeting leader. Thank you.
Please continue, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay. So again, there's a tremendous amount of energy. I consider the fact that we have community interest in this education of our kids, regardless of where it comes from, that's a good thing. And we need to build upon that. Okay. Again, I think the proposal contains elements that these do not appear to align with district and community views. The IMOs, as an example, is one example. And there's also this question in the Reimagine Schools proposal, who is the final decision maker in these commissions. And so those are things that if you all as board going to take this on, in this proposal along with the other 70 proposals that I think you would want to take a look at. And then the next to the last bullet here, the Reimagine Schools proposal, I think should be incorporated into the overall review process of the total package of 71 proposals. And I think by tabling the Reimagine Schools proposal, giving you all time, giving staff time to establish the level of community engagement that we think is needed, then that would be the approach that we would take with it. I would propose we would take with Reimagine Schools along with the other 70 proposals. Next slide. That's simply a list of your information, a list of the 71 proposals that were received. The next slide, again, just for information, is a list of ESSER terms and definitions, acronyms and abbreviations.
Can we go back to that previous slide? That's a lot of information that is shown.
Sir, unfortunately, this is not a public, it's a meeting held in public. We're gonna let Mr. Kennedy finish. Please.
Thank you. And so this is a PowerPoint that I'm presenting, and just for information, this PowerPoint will be posted on our website in board docs. This slide here shows the ESSER terms and definitions that are in this that we've been using, and so just the acronyms and the abbreviations again for information. Next slide. And this is just a wrap up slide, just to reiterate that the staff is proposing to the board that we have this vision of by the spring of 2027, all students being able to read, on grade level by fifth grade, following these three strands of work: rigorous grade level instruction, high quality teachers and leaders, and wraparound services, undergirded by the support structure that I believe would be necessary for success. And with that, last slide's board feedback and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. As a reminder to audience members, these slides are in board docs so that you can review them at a later time. And please also remember that this is not a meeting where everybody's participating. And even as board members, we do have a way that we do things. I'm going to go around on questions for what Mr. Kennedy and the rest of the staff have shared. Dr. Frazier, do you have any questions?
Yes, I just have. We had talked about acceleration schools in a previous meeting, and I want to find out whether we're going to increase the number of those schools, and have we taken a look at the need to increase the number of schools?
That's actually a board decision, because the board had set up the original distinction of what should be an acceleration school. Because of COVID, the state report card has been on hold. So the first time we'll see a state report card will be this spring, which will give us some insight. And I think as we fine tune the strategy around these three pillars, do some schools want and need the high touch support that's provided by the acceleration team to get to the next stage? Or are they developing a different strategy, such as Mr. Darby with the innovation school that he has, that they believe is going to get them there in a different path? So that, I think, is a key decision that's going to come up in the next few months.
Thank you.
Dr. French?
Yes, so I haven't had time to look at the slide of all the organizations providing proposals. Now, I haven't seen a list before this, but I had heard, and I'd like to clarify, were there any schools in CCSD that submitted proposals that went through this process? Okay, have schools submitted proposals through a different process?
So I have not received any proposals from schools. It's my understanding that there are some communities or schools that are working on proposals, but I have not received, and I don't think staff has received any proposals yet.
Okay, and you state here that the Coastal Community Foundation submitted this proposal to the ESSER 3 Advisory Committee through the portal that Mr. Hamer.
I'm not sure how the Reimagine Schools proposal came in. What I wanted to do tonight is to make sure that the board understood that we had 71 proposals, 71. How all of those came in, I don't know. Some came in unsolicited before the portal was created. Some came in through the portal, and others maybe other ways. I don't know.
Is it appropriate for an organization that large to provide a proposal and be involved on ESSER advisory committees? So Mr. Goss says that he was involved in the ESSER advisory board, which I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about.
So tonight's the first time I've heard that statement, so I don't know either. We can look into it, but I have not heard that. So, and Mr. Hamer is the person that's been managing the review process. So he's saying no.
I guess I don't understand why he has that understanding. When did he ever interact with our staff or board members regarding ESSER advisory committees, whether or not he was involved in vetting the members of the committees or any other aspect?
Dr. French, there are two things. The board actually submitted the names of who's on that committee, and they were named during a board meeting. He is not one of them, but whatever is being discussed, that is sort of hearsay, and I think we need to move on.
The names are not published.
Okay, what I said is that they were announced at the meeting and that we submitted them and we named them, so we need to move on. Mrs. Green, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was just curious as to how you arrived at fifth grade reading level versus something less than fifth grade, third grade, or fourth grade.
So typically students should be reading by the third grade. That's the target and the optimum. So we added fifth grade in part to give recognition that with COVID, kids are going to be a bit behind, and it's going to take us some time to phase in all the changes that we have in place, such as the new ELA curriculum. We're not even at our fastest execution to make sure that we're using good change management. All schools won't have that up and running until the fall of 2024. We'll prioritize those schools that have the greatest achievement gaps. We want to make sure that we're thinking very creatively, very smartly about that. So that's part of the reason, is to give us a little extra time. It also allows us to have more test score data. The test score data pre-third grade is a little noisy because of the developmental level. Between third grade and fifth grade, we have more data that allows us to target energies on where particular learning gaps may be. And I think the last piece I will say is that thinking about the fifth grade, reading should be first and foremost. As Mr. Kennedy said, we're thinking about several priorities. I will keep saying math because I want principals and teachers to worry about math. Fifth grade math is also predictive of algebra success at the high school level in South Carolina. The state has already researched that. So we can get all of our kids by fifth grade in reading and math. We know they're very well likely to be on track for college or a career in sports and fan.
I just hope we aren't setting the bar too low. But I understand your rationale. My other question, Mr. Kennedy, what is the process for going forward with regards to the allocations or awarding of the ESSER 3 funds? I'm not sure questions from Mr. Hamer, I'm not sure.
So tomorrow at the superintendent's cabinet meeting, we're going to finalize that plan. But essentially, so the details are not finalized yet. We'll do that tomorrow. But again, there's an analysis of each of the proposals to see how they may or may not align with one of these three pillars as a part of the vision. And then once that determination is made, then we will go out to our schools, to our principals, and make sure that we understand that those proposals would support the work that they would have to do to make this vision a reality. And so that's the overall thinking of it. The details have not been worked out and will be worked out tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see Ms. Herderick on anymore, so I'm gonna go to Ms. Coates.
Sure. So thank you. And as often happens, is you guys have spent a lot of time thinking about this work and a lot of time putting together this proposal. It was 47 minutes long and it's 22 pages. My request is pretty simple. Would you bring this in its exact format to the next committee of the whole meeting and give us time to be able to ask actual questions about this proposal? I mean, I think at my last count, I have 11. This is not the right place to do that, but I want to make sure, but I need my questions answered. I don't know that we need to sit here tonight and ask all 11 questions related to these things, but I do think we need to discuss them. I mean, first and foremost, it looks like there's something in here that says in about 6 weeks, this is going to be wrapped up and decided. I want to make sure we're clear on that because there's something in here that says we're done with community engagement January, February 2022, and that's 5 weeks from now. So would you commit to bringing this back and allowing us to ask questions at the committee of the whole in a format that works a little bit better? Or do you want me to start asking all these questions right now?
Bring it to the committee of the whole.
But can you say, so are you saying at this point that you don't anticipate awarding these funds until when? When is there, or have you gotten to the point where you're going to award ESSER funds in terms of a date?
So we have not.
Good.
So we will, as a part of the work that we're doing tomorrow, we'll work through that. And the intent, Mrs. Coates, is to come back to the committee of the whole in February, which I think is February the 10th, for an update exactly where we are and what next steps might be from that point forward.
Okay. So then I just have one question tonight that will be something I probably want to talk about in February. Is the pillars are astounding. They're great. But I want to know where the gaps are because I'm looking for it and I honestly can't find the pillars, but rigorous grade level instruction.
what's the gap? We've been talking about rigorous grade level instruction as long as I've been on the board, and now we've got a proposal to do rigorous grade level instruction. It on its face looks like what's been happening if this is the goal. So I'd like to see some gap analysis that says rigorous grade level instruction. Here's what we're doing that's already working. Here's what we want to add. I mean, I think it's 3 questions. Does it exist? Does it exist ineffectively, or are you doing it and you just want to improve it? But I think that when you put those words out there, the presumption is it doesn't exist today. Same for high quality
I think
teacher
I think we can
programs.
do that, Ms.
Yeah,
Mrs.
I don't want to
Coach.
give the perception these things don't exist in
And that's
some
right.
format.
It's been a multi-year change management effort, because so just to say what we know already, math has come first. So we feel most confident that our math in tier 1, which is the core instruction time, is grade level, rigorous and consistent. We're providing professional support for those schools and new teachers to get them up to speed. Our next priority is ELA. And then we are also thinking in terms of the new science standards that are coming out, for instance, thinking about intervention, thinking about our multilingual learners and what our strategy is for ESL instruction. So those things will be coming. So your point is well taken. We can come out, because what I would not want to send a message to many tired teachers out there, we are not trying to do all of this at once, and we're never going to be done. Because as soon as we get to the end of all these subject areas, the thinking and the technology and math instruction will be better, and we're going to have to update those things. So it's going to be a cycle of focus. But I think one of the things I want to call out, because I'm the nerdy instructional teacher type, is a lot of community proposals out there, great ideas. But the core thing to close the achievement gap is what happens in the classroom with teaching and learning. So a significant amount of this investment has to be in that space.
Right. And I don't want a perception out there that we haven't been doing rigorous coursework and our teachers have not been doing rigorous work. Therefore, it needs to be a goal. I want to make sure that we define that's been happening. What do you want more? The same for the other 2 pillars. We've been doing an astounding amount of wraparound services. We've been doing an astounding work with teacher pipeline development. I don't want that to all get dismissed by something that says, well, now we're going to make it a goal. Does that make sense? But I do look forward to having more discussions. The last thing I would say is there's going to be a need at some point for either the proposals, which clearly is voluminous, or at least the proposal dollars per applicant, and certainly some sort of cross-referencing. I found 7 proposals from groups that we already fund. I don't know why we would fund them out of our budget and then fund them out of ESSER. We might want to have those conversations. Thank you.
Ms. Darby.
Two questions. So my understanding is, and Don, I was just looking for that date you talked about, that the money needs to be spent. So we've got all of this money and it's got to be spent by the fall of 2024.
September 30th, 2024.
What was it?
September 30th, 2024.
So September 30th, 2024. So I just wonder about in these proposals that we have from folks, does that mean then the following school year 24 or in 25, we're just going to have to stop doing things, or how are we going to be able to sustain what we think we need to sustain?
So a couple thoughts on that. So one, I mentioned that with the Reimagined Schools proposal, that there was some elements that could be useful. And then this is not a statement from me right now in support of any recommending any proposal, but when I look at the proposals, there are things that are useful in a number of these proposals. One of the ones from the Coastal Community Foundation is that they have committed to raise the funds to be able to sustain the work. So that's one. The second piece is the way I think about the use of fund balance in the district, and the new interim CFO thinks the same way, is that we can use the fund balance to, over the next 3 to 4 years, if we can build that up additionally, and we can assign or even commit funds to go towards successful programs that are generated out of the ESSER $3, and so that we can have sustainability. And so that's something that we can do internally. In fact, something that, at least from the finance perspective, is being considered And we'll talk more about that with the Art and Finance Committee as we, as we get into the next few months.
Okay, and then my other question is, and I don't know if I'm the only person that feels this way, I feel like with COVID and us not having some of the data that we get, the school report card, that kind of information that we get from the state, we don't have a real concise way for us to look at our 85 schools and see where, gosh, we've made all this progress, but in these other places, we haven't yet. And I'm assuming that's information that you all are looking for. I'm looking at Carolyn, but can we do that with, like, for us to look at, gosh, these acceleration schools, as these three don't need to be acceleration schools anymore because they've gotten to where they need to be? Or is there that data out there? Will we be getting more of that from the state? How are we going to be able to tell that we're accomplishing what we want to accomplish?
So for the next couple of years, the data will be messy as we come out of the COVID because we haven't executed testing systems consistently. But we will see the first report card data at the end of this year. And we also are holding tight to the map because it is consistent, it is normal reference, it is a national test. We anticipate that we'll be able to share map results at the end of February with this board. I will call out that the fact that we're still in COVID is affecting that. So a lot of kids have been out this month, which is our testing month, and a lot of teachers who administer those tests have also been out. So those challenges create practical realities that delay some of this, but that's our aim, is to be able to give you a snapshot, and we would do that again at the end of the year. My expectation is that the cabinet will come with a recommendation on the expansion or not of the acceleration schools for the board to react to. I think the timing of that needs to be after we have final year-end test results. So we have a sense of, like, did the acceleration schools do what we said we were going to do? Did that investment lead to results?
Yeah. And then the last thing is that the committee of the whole in February is on the 14th. So maybe we could start in the middle of the day. So whoever has romantic dinner can still do that. But I think talking about some
No
more of this.
widows don't care how late they're here at night, so we're good.
Just FYI. Just 1 second. Reverend Mack, do you have any questions?
Yes, just one question. I know the schools have been given an opportunity to submit their proposal. Is there a deadline? And the reason why I'm asking the question, because I know at the next committee of the whole, we're going to be looking at all of the proposals. I think it's a good opportunity to see what the schools are submitting as well.
Yeah. So I don't have an answer on that, Reverend Mack, tonight. We'll certainly work through that at the cabinet meeting tomorrow. So we have, for instance, got the ESSER 3, and we know that schools have submitted some requests through the ESSER 2 funds. So we have to work through those different, I won't call them conflicts, but just get those things in line.
Before I go around, again, for second questions, I do have a question. I saw on the November, December piece of the timeline that you mentioned that you graded the proposals. Was there any sort of, point at which a proposal didn't meet X grade and it got dropped off, or is the list that's here the whole list?
I think the list of 71 that's listed is the complete list. None have been dropped off.
Okay.
It's a complete list.
Okay, so and I wasn't asking to see if any were missing, but just wondering, according to the grading system, are you thinking of condensing, or is there enough, is there a potential that all 71 will be, are still able to be considered, that there's enough money for all 71 is my question.
Well, in the review to date, it was looking at the 71 with which ones are valid, whatever valid is. There was a rubric that was used in trying to match those proposals against that review rubric, and then ranking those 71 proposals against that rubric. And so there would be, we don't have a cutoff. We won't say like 33 will be funded. But so the next step then is if we were to adopt this concept of these pillars around this vision, then which of those proposals then would align to those to that work in the pillars, especially the the wraparound services.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to get an understanding of what the grades were intending to do, but that explained it. Dr. Frazier, you had another question?
Yes. Are we including sustainability when we take a look at these proposals? And then how are we going to weed out those proposals that are merely looking at just sustaining an organization and not making sure that they are school related or making any difference in the COVID response that we're dealing with? And then it's my understanding that many of our schools have already received COVID-2 monies, and will we receive a listing of those schools? Because I don't think a lot of people understand it. Some of the schools have received COVID money.
So on the first question there on sustainability and what's working in that, in one of the slides that had the accountability and support underneath the pillars, there's a line in that says project management and performance management. So we would be establishing what are the measures, what are the metrics that indicate success or non-success. And so the ones that are not successful, we would not try to sustain. The ones that are successful, I mentioned a minute ago, one avenue for sustainability, which is the use of the fund balance and how we manage that. And then on the second question, on the ESSER 2, 100% of our schools, I believe, receive $100,000 of the ESSER 2 money, and as an appropriations to them to use as they saw fit, and then within the allowable categories, and then also within the ESSER 2, there's money that's not controlled necessarily by the school, but that's being benefited at school because we have the funds are being used there.
Just one correction, 100% had an opportunity to apply. Not all
Thank you.
schools opted to do the 100,000, just to call that out. But every school has got an ESSER 2 investment because we also did increase the teacher ratios in some places due to safe COVID capacity.
Thank
That's
you.
all in ESSER 2 as well.
Thank you. Dr. French?
Yes, just to follow up on Reverend Mack's question. I was hoping that we would hear a little bit more about how you're going to let schools apply for ESSER funding. And is that something else that you're going to be working on but in time for our CAL meeting? So that, because part of what I'm thinking is that even if some of the proposals that might come from schools might be funded through our regular general operating fund. So all of that would be important to have in time to make sure we get through the budget process and decide where ESSER needs to supplement what they need. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So again, tomorrow tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, we will be weighing in on those processes. And so we don't have those fully designed yet. And also I would say that if we as an organization are going to focus on this reading on grade level by grade 5, then we would treat any proposals coming from schools in our engagement with school principals in their communities in the same way we would do the proposals coming from the outside. Do they align with what the vision is, and how do we get to that vision?
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to item 8A. Oh, excuse me.
Okay, Lance, 2 short questions. Just for clarification, in the very beginning, you said the ESSER 3 funds can only be spent on 15 categories. I want to make sure that we're clear, especially for the public. Those categories were federally determined, weren't they? They're not 15 categories that CCSD determined. They were determined before the funds came out, correct?
That is correct.
Still, I want to make sure we have that perception out there that we don't choose what 15 categories that came to us with the money.
We are required to use those 15 categories from the federal government.
And the second question, and I don't know if it can be answered tonight, but how much ESSER money is left? And I think you said there'd be an analysis in the future. Are you planning to analyze the ESSER 2 money after it's expended and done, or? because if it worked, it seems like you would be wanting to put it into the budget for continuation.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do we have a handle on where the ESSER two's been spent and the value of that? What's it done for us?
So part of the challenge is to put in all those support structures that I have in the that undergird the performance management, the project management. So that's being developed now. We have prototypes. We have prototypes for the ESSER two, but it's not fully designed and rolled out. But we've made tremendous progress on that. But I wouldn't say that we would have it in time for. It may be difficult to have it complete for the fiscal year 23 budget, but I would imagine that certainly would hope that we would do so by the fiscal year 24 general operating fund budget. Now, it's not going to take us that long to get there, but we may not have it for this in the short term.
Thank you, Ms. Walters.
Okay. Audit and Finance Committee. 8A.
Ms. Sweeney, you're like.
Are there any questions concerning, that's your question. You
Oh,
can
sure.
ask
Okay, so you know what? I'm sorry. We don't have a presentation. No, okay. Are there any questions regarding item 8A?
So I have just, and I'm not sure who to ask, but just kind of quickly taking a look at it, there's an awful lot of raises. Not that I'm against raises, but like a $12,000 raise for the director between the 2022 that was presented last January and the presentation for this January. There's a $13,000 raise for somebody else. But when we get to the actual teachers, there's a $33,000 increase, but it's because you added a teacher. There's no funding.
So Ms.
Yeah, can we speak to why these top levels are getting such 10 and 11% raises on their salaries?
So I'm going to ask Ms. Foxworth, who has about early childhood learning. She's on the Zoom, and she can respond.
Good evening, board members. All the raises reflected the raises that were passed last year from the board. We did not add any additional raises. They are all the adjustments that were.
So are you saying they're because we approved the bands and then you took these jobs and put them inside a band?
They were all, we just followed the district's band, and we did not do anything additional. We just followed the same compensation scale that the district follows.
And thank you. So basically that means everybody in a D64 got about, your $120,000 people were getting $12,000 raises because we did that. That's one person. I didn't expect there to be a 10% raise from 120,000 to 132,000 in 1 year for one person, when this is a program that desperately needs more teachers, more teacher support, more money into the classroom. And that's not anything to say with Head Start. I'm now wondering if we've done that across the district.
Ms. Bone.
Maybe it's something we can talk about, Mr. Kennedy, at another time.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions on item 8A?
You need a
Okay.
motion?
I move to approve the early Head Start funding application for the grant period June 1, 2022 to May 31, 2023.
Second.
Any questions? Additional questions? Please cast your votes. That item passes. Item 8B, are there any questions?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your vote. That item passes. Item 8C, I've got a question. Go ahead, Ms. Darby.
Can somebody, I would assume it's Mr. Rowe, but just talk a little bit about if any of this reallocation piece is going to academic magnet. We just had some academic magnet parents reach out to us about whether, growth at the school and things that they needed. Can you address that, Mr. Rowe?
Yes, ma'am. So first off, I would like to bring to the board's attention, I'm glad you asked the question, that this is part of a larger funding program. It wasn't simply we took projects and said, let's fund it with this. We looked at what is coming up for the early out capital maintenance, what is coming up for 8% capital maintenance, and what's coming up with the phase 4 for capital maintenance. And we looked at the projects that we wanted to start now. We were ready to start now, not 2 months from now, that we could begin immediately. And in some cases, projects that may extend more than a year, so we wouldn't have to deal with funding in a particular year. So that's how we came up with this list as a subset to all of the other projects that you'll see next month. Specifically to Mrs. Darby's question, the track refurbishment is focused on the Danny Jones track for academic magnet. So there is a project for them specifically in here. The other items that I've heard from the school on are part of the future budget. The weight room improvements is in that fixed cost of, or in the early out projects. The paving improvements you approved last year in the phase 5 wave 1 district improvement project. So there are a number of projects in different form or fashion for academic magnet.
So their projects are getting cut. It sounds like.
Correct.
Okay. I'll make a motion and move to approve the funding allocation for the academic magnet settlement. Second.
May I ask a question?
There's two more questions. Ms. Coates?
Yeah. Were these projects already in the facilities management? That's what you're saying. We didn't say, here's facilities management. We got this pot of money. Let's go find 10 new things to do. These were already within what was going to get done anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
They were selected from the list that was already there.
Thank you.
Dr. French?
So given that, I was a little confused. You mentioned the Danny Jones track facility. Isn't that a city facility, not a CCSD facility?
Yes, ma'am. We have incredible partnerships with our local communities. It does save both organizations money in the long run by not having separate standalone facilities. As you're aware, the Bonds Wilson campus is very constrained. All of the fields, in fact, they use are in different locations. The academic magnet uses the Deer Park baseball field that we've refurbished. They use the Danny Jones track, just like North Charleston High School does. So we utilize community fields and have a partnership to share resources and invest in their facilities.
If there are no other questions, please cast your vote. That item passes. Item 8D.
Move to approve.
Second. Are there any questions? Okay, please cast your votes. Reverend Mack, are you able to vote on board docs? Okay. Okay. Okay, that item passes. Item 8E is for information. Are there any questions on the information that's in board docs? Okay, and item 8F is also for information. Any questions on what's provided? item 9A, Dr. French.
Yes, I was just asking to be allowed to use some of the professional development funds for board members to reimburse me for part or all of the expenses related to training with the Council of Great City Schools on student outcome focused governance. Just to be clear, the training itself is over several months, starting in February, March, going through October, and it's cost $3,500. They have changed it to be mostly virtual, so there would only be one planned in-person retreat that would require any travel expenses. And I realize this is a rather large ask, so I totally understand if it's only a partial reimbursement.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
So in the fiscal 2022, what's left in our budget?
So we got a listing of that.
Now, listing of expenses, do we have anything that puts that in a checkbook style that tells us what's left?
Yes, because we just had 2 board members that canceled their trip, and we are still working on trying to get reimbursed. We probably don't get reimbursed for the registration. We're able to cancel the flight and the hotel. So I just need to go back and revamp that. But the list that you had to begin with, just deduct.
So I think in order to determine if we have the funds to approve, we'd have to determine if we have the funds. So.
Okay.
In the fiscal 2022, we still have $3,500 in board travel remaining.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any additional questions?
Just a comment, and I should have mentioned this when I talked to you today, but the only concern I have is that this is not something that you're just going to go to 3 weeks from now, get some training. It's an ongoing, it looks like it's ongoing past when the election is going to be. Is that right? I mean, it's an ongoing training.
No, it would be complete in October, and the registration cost would be now. The travel expenses would be in October, so that would be next fiscal year. It's an intensive training. There are 3 or 4 meetings a month, I believe, and lots of work to do outside of that. So I do intend to run again, and I'm hoping to continue to use that training.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is an application process.
Yes, so I might not get chosen.
I was going to say, is there a way that we could consider this if you are chosen, then it would become a request at this point? I'm not sure it's it's a conversation, definitely, but maybe gives the board more time to consider what's being asked and would have another idea if we knew this was something that your application had been accepted for.
It's helping me to plan for how much I have to budget out of my personal funds. So that's why I'm asking before.
But
I
if
apply
you're
and
accepted,
the
you're not
application-
obligated, correct?
I suppose that's true. I suppose they would put people on a waiting list, but I would not want to apply and then back out. I mean, I would feel bad about that.
Okay.
That's why I was bringing it before the application deadline. If there are issues that you want to discuss, I mean, I'm sure we can come to some kind of.
I'd like to just mention, could we make a motion to fund this based on her acceptance?
I think that's a good idea, but I think that's for the rest of the board to consider too. Would you like to make that motion? How
Yes,
about
ma'am.
that?
Yes, I would.
Is there a second?
And are we approving the tuition or are we approving all expenses related? Because it's also talking about the books and only one optional travel. I mean,
I'm not worried about the books.
So you're just asking for reimbursement of the tuition?
The tuition and
And
possibly
travel.
the travel, yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll make a second My only hesitation is we've never spent $3,500 in 1 year on one person. So this is a rather large leap. Is there any consideration for paying 60 or 70% of it, or we want to go yes or no? And this is a conversation for the board. You made the motion. You can say, no, I don't. I want to do it for 100%. And that conversation
I think
is.
we ought to do it for 100%.
I think because we have not spent money, a number of board members haven't spent any travel money, there's enough money in there to cover
Yes.
that.
There is.
That's what Julie just said. Yes,
My motion is still on the floor.
Mhm.
It is.
yeah, there was a second.
There was a
Cindy
second.
said she.
So if there are no more questions, we can cast our votes. I think so. Yeah. Okay, that item passes. All right. Item 10, upcoming meetings. We do have a committee of the whole meeting coming up on February 14th, as Ms. Darby pointed out. Yeah.
Then can we put on notice? We'll be starting earlier in the day.
Let's all hope. And
Madam Chair.
Is there any particular?
we are, I'm just giving.
Oh, I see. That's what I want to say.
Okay. Have a motion to it. Will you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm wondering whether it would be possible for us to submit questions to Mr. Kennedy prior to the committee of the whole. Since some of us have 10 questions, I myself have 10, so that we won't have people here all night again.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yes, so as you all know, that is always a part of the process. You can always do that, and we've been asked to do that numerous times. So yes, please. Dr. French, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask again if we have an update on when we're going to start our board training with CCSD.
We still have not heard anything back.
Okay.
Lauren and
Yeah.
Courtney have reached out.
Yes.
A couple of times.
All
All
right.
right, do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
The meeting is adjourned at 7:16.